So Bri, thank you so much for joining me today on this live. I'm so excited. We're going to be talking about, yeah, you're welcome. I want to talk about cognitive dissonance, especially in light of the Sandra Brown's webinar and the way she explained it, which was even more clear. It was a better explanation than a lot of us have. We've been trying to, say what it is, but I felt like her explanation was profound. In fact, I cut out that portion of the webinar. So if any of you want to see what she said, please go to TikTok to see that specific spot where I quote her or have her, I show her, I should say. So I want to talk about that today, but I also want to talk about the effect in the victim, because you and I have both experienced it. I experienced it both as a child, and then I experienced it as an adult. And I think that you did too, if I understand correctly. So you know what a romantic partner is feeling, and you also know what a child's feeling. So yes, and I do too. So I thought that would be fascinating for us to bring in both components, a child's experience of cognitive dissonance and an adult's experience of cognitive dissonance, so we can kind of compare and contrast them. So if you all don't mind, can I start out with the definition of what Sandra Brown shared in the webinar on Thursday night? Do you mind if I start there first? Okay. And you know what? Before I start, let's introduce ourselves to both platforms. Why don't you tell everybody who you are, Bri?
Yeah. Sure, thank you. So hi, everybody. My name's Bri. I am a survivor of narcissistic abuse. I've experienced it through childhood, friendships, romantic partners, and with my mother-in-law. Varying degrees, of course. And I found my passion in helping people understand what abuse is, because that I didn't understand was happening to me. So my healing didn't start until I could finally understand that's what was happening and occurring in my life. So now I'm a certified life and relationship coach, and I help people rebuild themselves after abuse and hopefully create some validation, because I know that's a big part of the healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I need to turn that off so that doesn't happen again. Okay. Yes. And for those who are familiar with Bri's platform, but not familiar with me, I'm Dr. Carrie McAvoy. I'm a psychologist with over 20 years of counseling experience. And I'm also a narcissistic abuse survivor. I'm a childhood survivor of abuse, as well as a narcissistic abuse survivor. And so it's been interesting to be both clinician and work with people who are suffering, but also to be a person on this side of it to experience because I can even share what a clinician's perspective if we have time for that, but it's very different to be on which side of the seat you're sitting in, so to speak, in the therapist office. So yes, I'm also, you can find me Carrie McAvoy, PhD. I primarily offer education and awareness on abuse and abuse topics. I do offer a clarity call, but I'm not coaching and I'm not counseling these days. I get asked that a lot, but I'm not doing it. Yes, Bri, someone said how cool we know each other. Bri and I met on platform, but we've now met in person. So our relationship is really now also based in real time and real life, not just simply online. So It is really cool that we know each other. We're part of a large collaborative group called Narcavengers. That's how we really know each other. We actually are doing joint ventures together, which is super exciting. And I'm glad we're doing that. So let me start out with what Sandra Brown defined. And by the way, for those who are new to Sandra Brown has been a researcher clinician for her entire life on abuse, specifically pathological relationships abuse. She's also worked for years. She said 15 years she's had a group work with psychopaths. I don't know how she got into that, but she's very familiar with psychopathically ill individuals as well as narcissistically ill individuals. She used to do work with them, trying to change them, which is fascinating hearing her take on that. So cognitive dissonance, as we understand it from a social psychology perspective, if you were to pick up a book in college or graduate school, it's defined as a momentary decision in which we have conflictual beliefs about that situation. The example I like to use a lot is you're at the end of the monthly budget, you're out of money, you see a shirt on sale you need for work, it's your size in the right color and it's on for sale, but you're out of money. You don't have enough money for gas if you buy it, but if you don't buy it, it might not be sale when you get paid next. And then you'll miss this great opportunity. And you may even have to order it and wait. So you're in this bind. the experience that you have internally in that moment is cognitive dissonance. You feel conflicting beliefs. You don't want to miss the moment, but you also don't want to be in a pinch, because then you're in a problem. So it's the angst or the uncomfortableness, the stress we feel in that moment. We'll make a decision, and simply making a decision solves the dissonance, and the dissonance goes away. But then
we just have buyer's remorse later, and that's fine. But
or I probably would have waited. Would you have waited, or would you have bought it? What would you have done?
If I know me, I would have bought it and then felt bad about it.
Oh, okay. I would have waited and then fretted about whether or not it was still there or not.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. But that's cognitive dissonance. And it was never meant to be something we experienced long-term. But it's something we have happen to us all the time. I mean, you probably had a face today, around some decision somewhere. Oh, Sly said she would have bought it too. Yes, that's an interesting question how we saw it.
I'm just going to say that's my impulse control, and I'm working on that.
Well, if any of you have taken the Big 5 personality inventory, I score almost 100% on conscientiousness, which means it tells you all that I'm riddled with guilt, lots of guilt. Which we can get into that too, about what is that and how is that. Yeah. And Ashley's over on Instagram. She goes, "I'm with you, Carrie. I would have waited." So what happens with cognitive dissonance and narcissism is really actually a very different thing. It's not even, it's interesting we're using this word to describe something, because when you hear what actually is happening, it's profoundly shocking. But anyone who's experienced it, when we start to describe it, we're like, oh yeah, that's me. I lived right there. It is when you build two realities in your head. You have an experience of your person that you're in a relationship with. Now, we're going to be talking about not just partners, but also family members. So you have this reality of whoever is the loved one in your life, of what they're like in their good moments, and you have the reality of what they're like in the bad moments. And both realities actually simultaneously exists at the same time. And the reason I'm pausing is because Brittany always takes polls through this. So she just asked everybody, who's the narcissist in your life? The answers were parent only, partner or spouse, friend or workplace, or more than one. You want to guess what the answer? Which one scored the highest?
Parent?
No. They actually broke out evenly. Partner,
really?
Yeah, parent and friend were all 12.5%. The more than one scored 62.5%.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does make sense.
To know one, you know more.
Often, unfortunately, that is what often happens. So you build these realities. You have initially, when you meet the person, now granted, if it's a parent or a sibling, you don't meet them. They're always in your life. And you may not even have gone through love bombing. That may phase. That would be interesting to talk about. What does that look stage-wise? Because it would be very, very different. But the person that you have the sense of them as good, and they show up, and there's amazing connection with this person, or at least you hope for amazing connection. Maybe you have glimpses of it. But then you have a lot of painful moments with this individual where they betray you, they hurt you, they abuse you, they disappear on you. There's all sorts of weird stuff that they do. And so both people, it actually is like that. It's like two representations of a person, both realities, they fragment. There's the good person and the bad person coexists.
Can I add/ask a question? So as you're saying this, don't we also, though, in order to exist in these relationships, also sort of separate ourselves into two different? So in a sense, we are walking cognitive dissonance in that context of the relationship, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's cognitive dissonance, because that's actually the experience. But I would say, yes, we fragment. You're right. We're fragmenting ourselves. That's the next piece of this, is that they fragment and become both people, and we fragment ourselves in order to know how to show up for both types of people.
Thank you for the vocabulary.
Yeah. So our fragmented self, there's the you that knows how to show up with the good person, and has an emotional reaction with the good person, and knows how to keep them happy, the good person happy, and enjoys the good person. Mm-hmm. And then there's the you that you are, that knows the bad person or the bad side, and how to show up emotionally to them, how to manage them emotionally, and also how you feel about it when you're around them. So you become two people in your head, they become two people in their head, and there's two realities in your head. Which, how crazy is that?
Yeah. And it makes total sense when you lay it out like that, because I can think of how even I viewed myself based on their perception that they were setting up in the relationships. You know?
Yeah. 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 And for those of us who've been through a pathological experience, we know there was a setup. I remember the setup.
Mm-hmm.
And even when there is a narcissistic friends or maybe family members that I met, like I'm thinking in-laws, there were sets up there too. They set me up. They like said, I don't want this, or I expect this, or they kind of warned you there is this other side that you were going to experience. They wanted you to sort of learn how to manage that piece, you know?
Well, and I feel like self-betrayal is just inherent in abuse in general, because we kind of have to reject pieces of ourselves that we know they're going to reject. So we start taking pieces of ourselves that we know they can't like or won't accept and putting them outside, and then adapting our interests, hobbies, whatever we know they want to see from us in order to exist and be accepted.
Yeah. Yeah. Or for me, I knew that I knew that when I got into this one family dynamic that I was going to be on the outs. I knew that I couldn't adapt enough. And I anticipated being I like walked in knowing that I was going to be the outsider and that this was going to be problematic. But then I had to live with the conflict I felt about knowing I was failing every single time I showed up, which was still, you'd think, well, just opt out. Well, the problem is that's the weird part that I'm just kind of like having an aha right now with you. There is no opting out. No. Even if you don't participate, the dynamic is still happening.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. That was like, woo. Okay. Cause I remember.
So I was just about to admire the fact that you could actually have the foresight to understand on some level, actively being abused, I'm not going to be a part of this. I don't think I had that awareness. So for me, it was like, I knew very deep down I was not going to be accepted, but I couldn't help but this desperation to be like, maybe now, and just keep trying and trying and trying with no success.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was, no, I knew that. And then later it was confirmed that they let me know I failed. So experience of there's this and I'm failing it. Mm-hmm. And it's not, and yes, I'm being true to myself, but I'm losing so much here. And I also, the pain of it was so intense because I was always constantly deciding to fail. So I felt the failure second by second, which created the dissonance still. I still felt the dissonance, which is, man, awful. Very awful.
Well, I feel like that also, it takes such a hit on our own self-worth because we know we're betraying our authenticity of like who we want to be or how we want to show up, and we're choosing not to show up and knowing that we're going to fail, and then having the evidence that, again, yes, we did fail.
Yes. So it goes further. It gets worse than that.
Oh, great.
Oh yeah, isn't this lovely? So yeah, I know. It just like keeps getting deeper and deeper. So they've split. They're split. We're splitting in response to their split. Our sense of reality is now splitting with them. So we're splitting. And then what makes it even worse is that we want to resolve the split because we can't live in both realities. Our minds are not meant to live in two realities. So we start to try to break it. Like we try to figure out which is more real or find evidence or fix it. We try to like somehow stop it, but that part worsens it. Because we're trying to build evidence or do something logically to make it better. And then we assess, did it work? We go in and we measure at some level to check. And sort of how, like for me, when I was in the narcissistic romantic relationship, I tried to prove that he was working hard on the relationship or tried to prove he really wasn't working on the relationship. And all I did was led myself to feel more confused. I didn't it worse. It left me in a worse position.
It's so true. It's almost like the harder you work to make sense of it, it almost unravels more chaos. And you're like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to make this better, not worse.
Yeah. That's the part that's so horrific, is that you'd think your natural inclination to fix it is making you sicker.
Yes.
Yeah,
So backwards.
oh, I know. And then it's even another part that even makes it even more worse. So this is interesting. And I knew this already going into it. So when 80% of the Americans, and I know it varies from country to country. So unfortunately, I don't know all the rates per country, and I know we have multiple countries here today because they've been saying hi to me. So in fact, someone's from Australia here today, but which amazing, you guys, because it's in the middle of the night for you. But most of us, the majority of people will experience, there's Sarah, who's from Switzerland, but a majority of us will experience a massive traumatic event in our life. Because statistics say that that's common. I think in the United States, it's 75 to 80% of the population will experience a traumatic event. And there's someone from London, and that will be outside of the realm of normal. We're talking about not normal hiccups. We're talking about something that's, big.
Yeah.
I got to hear Dr. Vanderkolk say that 60% of us will resolve that well on our own. So majority of us, isn't that wonderful? The majority of us, our life, our family resources and all of that are built in well enough that we get over this. Right. And we heal, but 40% doesn't heal. That's the rate of not recovery, lack of recovery after trauma. But guess what the rate of trauma, the rate of not recovering from narcissistic abuse is? 75%.
Yes.
So the majority of, yeah, that's a huge number. I mean, so we're saying you don't resolve this easily or well as people who just suffer. I don't want to say just as, because there's no just as in this world, but those who experience other types of trauma tend to recover better than those who experience this type of trauma. This group struggles to recover.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is that because narcissistic abuse is a series of traumas and not just one trauma or a couple, but it's like an ongoing daily trauma that's like prolonged because they're relational traumas?
I don't know. She didn't say.
I'm very curious about that because like I've experienced other trauma in my life that's not linked back to narcissistic abuse. And I definitely feel like there's like an ability for me to just be able to set that down and like move on with my life. But narcissistic abuse is something that's been this very intense, deep deconstruction of just me as a person in a very different way.
Yeah, I think that's my guess is because the eroding of self is so severe that it causes incredible damage to us. Well, but maybe this is the answer. This is what she said. So she said when they look at the fMRI, that's functional MRI. So they're looking at actually how the brain is active, the activity, like what part is under aroused and other part which is override. It's actually a perfusion of blood. That's what they're looking at. How much like, because your brain consumes glucose, and they want to know how much blood does it need, because that shows how much activation and how much activity is going on in there. So when they found that, they looked at trauma and what happens to the brain, there's a certain area of the brain that lights up. Interestingly enough, cognitive dissonance is nearly the same area. So she said, and I thought she said, so when you're experiencing cognitive dissonance and you're being trauma, she said, cognitive dissonance causes trauma. And then trauma is causing cognitive dissonance, which is causing trauma, which is causing cognitive dissonance. And she said, your
best
brain,
friends.
She said, your brain is on fire.
Yeah.
Your brain is on fire because it can't, it's probably, I mean, I don't like to be mechanistic and say it's a computer, but if we want to think of it as an incredible organic computer, it would be like giving the computer an impossible task to solve, and there's no answer, and then you keep activating more stress and intensity for it and putting it under more pressure while it tries to solve something it can't solve. And that's what happens to us when we're in this
feedback loop, and it's like a roundabout you can't get off of.
Yeah. So no wonder it's like computer would fry it. That's what it would do. It would literally fry the computer. Right. And that's, I think, what she's saying. It's frying our brain when we're doing this because it can't solve. And then the pressure is it can't get out, and it's looping in itself. So let's talk about what that was like as an adult when it happened. And then I want to jump to what it was like as a child when it happened.
Oh man.
Yeah, I would say you start first.
I would say to sum up what it felt like, honestly, was just identity crisis, like to such an extreme. Um, it was like a complete loss of self. And even it felt like I was in a snow globe. I could see my life happening and I felt so detached from everything, even including who I used to be, that it felt like I wasn't real anymore. Um, I felt confused, like I couldn't trust myself on any level. Like even if I thought I was feeling something, I'm like, yeah, that's probably wrong. From all the gaslighting and the constant psychological abuse of learning to distrust my perception of me, my life, other people, everything. Just identity crisis is the best way that I've never felt so lost in my life and hopeless to the point of just this deep lostness within self.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to pause for a second just so those who are joining me on Instagram know who you
Oh,
are. Yeah, I know
okay.
you can't see her on Instagram. This is Abuse is Abuse. Is Bri Peterson. She has, what do you call it? What's your coaching business called?
BP Wellness Coaching.
BP Wellness Coaching. So she's on both platforms. You can find her on Instagram as well as on TikTok. And today we're talking about all the makings, the power, and the experience of cognitive dissonance in narcissistic abuse. So that's what and thank you so much for joining us over there. I appreciate that very, very much. Yeah, for me, the cognitive dissonance, and I felt it. I mean, I was actively trying to solve it. I'm a very logical person. I'm
Yeah.
autistic, which means that sometimes I have an ability to kind of cut off my emotional experience and sort of be out of touch of it. I don't lead with my emotions. I lead with my intellect, my cognition first.
Right.
So I could feel myself trying to solve the dilemma and that I was in an active dilemma. And I would literally every day, it's almost like I was measuring the amount of how did they look like they're working the program? Were they doing research? Were
The
they,
way you're putting this, I have a better answer, but you keep going because
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
loving
So
this.
I was actually
It's opened
measuring
up.
what were they in therapy? Were they? I was looking for all this. How nice did they treat me? How reflective were they about what they'd done? I was measuring. Were they irritable? Was the cycle starting? I was just measuring, and then I would measure all the bad stuff. It was like I was weighing two sides of the scale, back and forth, and then depending on where it was weighed depend on how much hope or encouragement I felt. But I could never solve it, and I saw myself getting crazy. I was getting crazier the more that I was doing this. And I felt I could see the craziness and I couldn't stop it. That was the other part is I am not an impulsive person. There's probably one area in my life that I am impulsive around, and it's slightly, and I debate, and that's with food. I will even debate with myself before I eat it, and I still may go ahead and eat it. But I'm telling you, I just don't willy nilly. I've never, guys, been openly falling down drunk ever in my entire life. I just don't do that. I just don't go there. So but I saw myself starting to do impulsive things, which I just don't do. I started breaking into his phone. I was getting into his computer. I was hacking his accounts. I even went so far to search the house and the garage of the building we lived in for a phone, for an extra phone. And finally, I went so far as I trailed him one day. I walked nearly a mile across because I was living in an area where we traveled by foot a lot. I walked a mile across town, found him, tried to hide. I mean, it was ridiculous what I
That's
was
such a
doing.
good story.
Oh man! Of course, he spotted me. I mean, I had never felt more. I didn't include this in the book, but I even stopped at a hotel where I knew he'd been staying to quiz who his guest had been when I was out of town. I mean, I was crazy. I had lost it, completely lost it. So and it was like when you see yourself sort of falling in slow motion, you can't stop this. That's how I felt. I felt like I was psychologically falling in slow motion and I couldn't stop myself from it.
Oh man, you just like unlocked some of the some of those
Yeah, I'm sorry for
cringeworthy
triggering any of
moments.
you. If I know if yeah, I'm sorry. I should have
No,
warned everybody that it was maybe a trigger warning for some of us, but
no, it was great. I mean, I loved it. It's
Yeah.
relatable. I think like that when I say desperation, I think that's what I'm trying to say, but you gave it like words was I was so desperate to like try and unlock what is the magic piece that's going to finally have this work. Is it like I would try and strategize all of my conversations beforehand, try and anticipate how, if I could just get the right lighting, the right mood, maybe the way I phrase this, they'll finally see and understand,
Yeah.
and I remember like when you're abused, right, your expectations get pushed so low that I remember my ex could smile at me and it was like, just like, oh, wow, like today's such a wonderful day. Like,
Yeah.
and there was, oddly enough, the first person that I trauma bonded with, I don't know if they were a narcissist or just like a fearful avoidant kind of thing. And we were just young kids, but it was like my first boyfriend, real boyfriend. When I was 16. And you would think like, I really think that relationship was high and low and this constant mouse and cat chasing thing. And I was always the one chasing, of course. And I remember when we like broke up, he like wouldn't actually talk to me or give me any sort of insight as to why he randomly broke up with me. And it literally I couldn't handle it. Already I'm being abused at home and then this is happening. And I did he lived an hour away. I didn't know his address. I just drove to the city where he lived and I was like, I'll find it. I found it. And he's like, how did you find me? I'm like, I don't know. That's not what I'm here about. Like,
we're not going to talk about that you're stalking, but yes.
Like, by the way, I've never done anything like that again. But the desperation for answers, like, please just tell me why. I just need to know why. I don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to, and I know for those of you who are joining us, I want to make sure that you know that if you hold on, we may not be able to take your questions today. I want to warn you about that because there's a whole lot to unpack. But I also want to know that we're going to end it with how to heal from this. So please stick around because there is clear-cut things that you can do to make this better. And you know what? It is not what you think. It is counterintuitive to heal. So if you're identifying with this, first of all, know that I have an online course that Bri coaches and we can help you step out of this. But also, I want you to know we will give you tips today and it is not what you think. It's going to be counterintuitive and it's going to be hard work. I hate to tell you, but it is essential because what's happening here is our brains are being damaged. It's not just our brain feels like we're on fire, which it is agonizing. I mean, all clients and all research participants who's been a part of this describe this as probably the most agonizing part of the abuse. But there is ways to actually really heal and to recover your functioning. And by the way, you're spending time with Bri and I. Do we look like we're compromised? Do we look like, are we stringing our sentences together? Yes, we're able to do that, which says to you, we're healing. Our brains are recovering from this horrible, horrible experience. So let's jump to childhood, because I know, by the way, there isn't any research into this. So you and I are just going to be talking anecdotally about our personal experiences of it. But now that we can stand back and we can look at what it felt like as adult, we can also then compare that and contrast that to our experiences as children. So I don't know how much you want to share of your childhood to give a framework for that. And I'm going to be kind of careful as well because I need to respect people who are still here. But help me understand what you came from a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I had a little bit of untraditional circumstances. So my mom had me, my dad left when I was 6 months old. And so my grandmother raised me, but my mother lived with us. My grandmother passed away from cancer when I was 13. And during that, right, I'm still experiencing ongoing abuse. My mother had a boyfriend who was domestically violent and also sexually abusive towards me. And so while I did have some safety with my grandmother, there was still all this ongoing abuse happening around me. When my grandmother passed, I call my mom's property because I'm not really a person. And then I had to deal with the abuse of her and my stepdad. It was just, it's like, yes, there was violence. Yes, there were these big explosive moments that could mark the abuse. But honestly, it was more that constant daily devaluation, not feeling welcome in my own home, the constant neglect emotionally, physically, or otherwise. Just feeling like a burden, like you can be seen but not heard. But also if you can possibly not be seen, that would also be great. Um, and then just a lot of parentification and infantilization, where I was constantly in the state of, I need to take care of them and I don't feel capable of taking care of myself. So I always felt stuck, like I couldn't leave.
Yeah. Yeah. For myself, I grew up in, my family has a lot of personality disorders in it. I was close to my grandmother. She's actually, in fact, I recently just had a conversation with a psychopath, a female psychopath, and
Okay.
she agreed that my description of my grandma fits. She said, "Oh yeah, it sounds very familiar." My grandmother was never diagnosed, but I truly believe my grandmother was a psychopath who then turned around and married another psychopathic, narcissistic psychopath. Can you imagine that combination? What a toxic setup that would have been. Horrific, horrific home. I mean, but he was violent, but never towards me. I was kept to be very, very far from my step grandfather, so
Yeah.
I really didn't know him. But I was my grandmother's favorite. She took care of me. She was she a lot of times she was one of my primary caretakers. In fact, but
Yeah.
there was severe, catastrophic level of sexual abuse, and there was also incredible neglect, emotional neglect. And it was openly said that children were being seen and not heard. So it was just sort of the environment that we lived in, is that we were to know our place and stay back, stay out. So I did a lot of rearing of myself. That was very, very
Same.
normal. Yeah, yeah. I grew myself up. I was financially emancipated pretty significantly at 12. My sister was only 8. They emancipated all of us at the same time, where we started paying for our bills and that
Yeah.
we had, and we
I
paid
got
for
a
our,
job at 12, so I feel
yeah,
that.
clothes, and I paid for my school stuff and those types of experiences. And yeah, there was a lot of gaslighting going on. There was no overt violence, and not even name calling, but it was just profound gaslighting, lack of reframing reality into the new reality in order to justify the crazy decisions that were being made. That were put, and a lot of time I was put in harm's way often. Like, my father was a farmer; he's now deceased, but we would be asked to do things that were too big or too heavy or too risky, and we were literally, where there were death, dying. They were, if it went wrong, we would die from that,
Right.
because we were on a farm doing farming things, and we were readily put. And I knew that. I knew I was being put in a position of harm's way. Yet there was no way out. So you'd have to mentally figure out how you're going to survive, knowing you could die. Yeah, it was was incredible. It was an incredible, awful, really awful. So how did that affect you? What was the cognitive First of all, were you aware something was wrong?
I always knew something was wrong. And at the same time, because everything's nuanced, it was also like, but it's my norm. So I think there was this deep knowing that my family was different. And in that, there was that isolation where I felt different than other people's families. And that difference also is like, yeah, but this is just how we are. We're normal in this dysfunction. This is just who we are. And it was really painful because it was like I didn't belong to them and I didn't belong to others. I was, one by myself.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was something was wrong. I figured I was wrong. I figured the problem
That's
lied.
part of it too. I mean,
Yeah,
that's part of it too.
yeah. I figured out how to work the system.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, because of my autism, I'm very rule based. So I created the mental rules, what I thought they were, and I began to work the rules to the degree that I could to make it work for me. Like, for example, I would disappear in the afternoon and stay in my bedroom and read. I would literally read a book a day, just to find something to do, because there was no television. So that was the way I kind of occupied my time. And I realized that if they didn't see me, they didn't think of me. And that was good for me. So I would do that. So I would figure, and I really learned to show up. So I'm a great helper and a great worker, which is, yes, I know we call that people pleasing, but I'm telling you that created safety for me. You didn't want the other way. Remember, we're talking psychopaths, narcissists, we're talking very dangerous people. Oh, that's pretty. I had the prettiest. Someone gave me a gift of lights. I've never seen that. It like almost lit up the
Oh,
whole.
isn't it beautiful?
Oh, wow. That's incredible. Yeah, it's hanging lights. Thank you. So I learned how to stay safe. And for me to stay safe was to show up and do it exactly. I even learned how to give them exactly what they asked. It hurt me tremendously in my life because I'm a very creative person that I've now discovered. I didn't know that, but I shut down all my creativity in order to like learn. I would ask like, how high, for how long, and what kind of smile did you want on my face while I did that?
Right.
And I would do it literally perfectly, and to the point that I was seen as the ideal child, as sort of I was the model. Even in the neighborhood, in school, I was seen as the model. Other parents used me as the model, which I didn't like that either. And it was just purely out of survival. It wasn't because I wanted to do that. But what it meant was I had to shut down everything about me that led to me to developing me.
Yeah.
Exploring and creativity and all that stuff. So it's interesting because when I think about the cognitive dissonance I was experiencing, I was more with myself. It wasn't really like, is this a good family or bad family? I wasn't in that kind of a context, except for this is how it showed up. I couldn't wait to turn 18, and I knew the minute I did, I was gone. And then I knew I would be completely independent. I planned to sort of, to the degree that I could emancipate, I would emancipate myself. I was ready to do, I was already doing, remember being neglected. So I was managing my own life, making my own foods. I was buying my own stuff. I was getting my own boots. I was getting myself to school. I was setting my everything. There was no help with homework, nothing. I was no help. So everything, I had to like find people to help me if I was to get help. So I was mentally gearing up to know that when I left for college, that would be the break point, and I didn't really intend to come back or be a big part of this family. So but I didn't, so that's the only cognitive dissonance that I had, was that I said to myself, when I'm 18, I'm out of here. But why would I say that if I thought we were a good family? But I believed we were a good family,
I think for me, where my cognitive dissonance as I was listening, because again, you're more like, when you give me examples, my brain starts working. So you might do better to answer first, because I just kind of like, well, this is my experience. But for me, my grandmother taught me to enable my mother. So, and there was this, I can't leave my mother. Like, I knew I needed to get out. I knew I needed to escape. And at the same time, I felt like if I do that, then I'm abandoning her, what will she do without me? Like, so there was a lot of obligation to her that was never spoken about, but definitely like deep rooted. So there was this, like, I need to escape. This is hurting me. And at the same time, I can't leave, because then that's abandoning her.
Yeah. Then you've betrayed her, like your grandmother said you shouldn't do. Yeah. The one that you love is putting you in that bind, and then you failed the one that you love. Wow, what a tough position.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially after my grandmother had passed, it felt like even a betrayal to her if I don't honor taking care of my mother. Yeah. Because it felt like she had handed down the gauntlet to me. you know?
Yeah. And she was no longer there. So you had her shoes to fill in for.
Exactly.
Yeah. See that. So I want to stop it for a second and emphasize what we're really saying to everybody, which is people often say, this is why I'm getting here, because I had a point to this. When women, it's usually women, so I'm just going to say that. When women come to you and I and say, should we stay or should we go? He's not mean to the kids. He's just awful to me, is what they say. Mm-hmm. They end up having a problem perceiving that it is a problem. And I'm telling you that one of the problems that you and I both had is we lost touch with reality.
Yeah.
I no longer knew what was real anymore. Because that's what I was experiencing. I didn't know this is how bad. I'm going to give you a trigger warning for everybody. I called my sexual abuse, I was molested. No, guys, I was raped as a 4-year-old. I wasn't molested. I was raped, multiple times raped. But we reframed it and called it, I was molested, which, yeah, that kind of captures it. But I tend to think of people being touched over clothing as qualifying. I mean, it's a lesser degree of abuse. We used words that softened it and made it so that it was really not that big of a deal, or at least it was less significant, less severe. And it wasn't until I watched Dexter season 5 with Lumen, with Julia Stiles, and watched what she went through and realized that her level of trauma mirrored my level of trauma and saw that Dexter was so upset that he thought that it was worthy of doing what he did to get retribution for her, that I realized I had this massive paradigm shift to realize that what I experienced was catastrophic. Yeah. But that was never presented that way in my childhood. It was presented as, oh yeah, this thing happened to you. It happened to you.
I didn't use the word abuse until TikTok. Because I had to minimize it in order to be safe, right? I couldn't say that I was being abused at home. So in my mind, it was, well, my mom's mentally ill, or, well, she's just her. That's who she is. Or she was abused too. She's just traumatized. Like there's all these minimizations of her behavior in order to make it okay for me to sit there in it. Because if I were to say I'm abused, that's like taking off glasses that cannot be put back on.
Right. You can't not see it. Yeah. For those who are just joining, this is Abuse is Abuse. Bri Peterson, her and I are today talking about the power of cognitive dissonance. And we're talking about it from the standpoint of an adult's experience in a pathological relationship comparatively to a child's experience who's in a pathological dysfunctional home. And both of us experienced talk about it from both perspectives. I remember the first thing my first experience of therapy, I got it for myself. Are we surprised? When I was 18 at college, and I went in and sat down with the therapist. And what I did for a second, and by the way, she was weird and really didn't understand what was going on with me.
Yeah.
And what I spent first just validating reality. That's all I did. I would say, this is happening. This is how I'm feeling. And then I would say, is that normal? And she'd say, yes, that's normal. And then I would say, and then this is going on, and this is how I feel. Is that normal? Yes, that's all I did. Is I started to break the illusion, or almost the delusion of what I had thought was reality, and began to rebuild what I thought was reality. And that was my first experience to realize, wow, I had been told this, and then now I'm finding out that it's this, or I'm finding out that I'm not, that being angry about this is normal, or being upset about this or angry about this is normal. That's all that I did at that first therapy session, which was really brief, but I was just validating reality. And I'll tell you, and I would love to hear from you too, I'm still deconstructing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I've been no contact for 7 years. And I'm still like finding stuff. I'm still like, oh, I got to unpack that one later.
Yeah. Me too. I'm still like, maybe the perception of God isn't what they said, or, maybe husbands and wives don't have to do this for husbands, or maybe this is what really I'm still unpacking over and over these terminologies. So when I come back to, do you agree? I know what you think, but so it's a kind of like set up perfect question, but what do you think when parents say, or a person who's in a pathological relationship saying, but my partner is good to the kids, do I really want to break up the family? What do you say to them?
Your kids are experiencing abuse right now.
Yeah.
Abuse looks different because it's customized to each victim. So depending on your kid's age as well, while they may not at this moment be receiving the brunt of it, they're witnessing it, and they're being traumatized by witnessing it in the first place. And that's also setting up their expectations of what relationships look like for later in their life. But then two, as those children progress and they try to become more independent and have autonomy, that abuse will eventually be more directed at them.
Yes.
They're already experiencing it. And I think so many of us want to be like, well, I'm protecting them or I'm shielding them. Maybe from some of it, but ultimately, no, you're not. And I say it with so much love. I really do. I know you think that's like protecting them, but it's not. It's because you're also, if you're the one being abused, if you're the parent being abused, you're not your best self. You're in survival mode.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And then the counter argument they often make is they'll say, well, but even if I divorce this person, they still got to deal with their father. And then I won't be there to be the middleman. So what do you say to that?
What I say to that is you are providing them a safe space away from the abuse, at least a portion of the time. If you are all under the same roof, you're always being abused.
Yes.
When you leave, you're giving them an opportunity to see what freedom from abuse can look and feel like. And it's giving you an opportunity to step into your best self so that you can be a better parent to them. and so that they know you're safe, truly safe.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I say too. I say that at least they have the portion of time that they're with you for you to be your full, whole, healthy self.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they will never get to experience you that. They're going to always be experiencing you in the abuse situation, and you're compromised, always
Yeah.
severely compromised. And you're not showing up as your best self to parent them either, because there's
No,
not enough of you to be there to show up like that.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah, I know that it's scary because we don't want to see our kids alone with the partner that we know is a bad partner, but there's no great option here. There's really not.
No.
In fact, the Netflix just released the movie When the Crawdads Sing. I
Yeah.
think that, yeah,
I
which
think
is
you're
yeah, something like that. It's a memoir. It's based on a true story, and it's about abuse. It's actually about narcissistic abuse. She doesn't label it that way. I
sure.
don't know if you knew that. I didn't know
No.
that. Yeah,
Mm-mm.
yeah. It's about a girl who's so profoundly neglected. Member walked out on her when she was like 9. She lived alone in the marsh and raised herself alone in the marsh with no school. She wasn't
That's
even going to school. No adult in her life. Sorry, my computer keeps doing that. But
no.
yeah, it was a quiet kind of movie, really well done, fascinating. I thought it was different. It was less of a kind of a thriller, but a sort of a quiet look at what happens when someone is raised in this really, really massive deficit. It's powerful.
Can I
Yeah,
elaborate real quick?
sure.
I just had a thought. So my grandmother passed away when I was 13. She had cancer. She was in remission for 2 years, got cancer again. And she decided my mom was actually supposed to tell me she had cancer. She didn't. I know my mom literally did that to punish me. She didn't like that I loved her mother more than I loved her. But you know what was frustrating is when I look back on my childhood, I'm in contact with some of my family members. It's the fact that everyone pretended that I wasn't experiencing it. Even because I think they were like, oh, you're a child, so we're going to protect you. You're not protecting me though, and you pretending I'm not going through it is making me feel further isolated because I can't. You're not even willing to have real conversations with me about what I'm actually experiencing. That was awful.
Well, that's cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
I would say
Yeah.
you just described. Yeah, it's called where the crawdad sings. So it's where, not when. Where the crawdad sing. The comment was is she was to ever at threat. Her dad told her to run out so far, or maybe her brother, run out so far to be where the crawdads sing. That's how she was to protect herself. That was the only piece of help she got from anyone. And she was the youngest, and every family member literally walked out on her. To the point even her father walked. I like, oh my soul. It was shocking. It was shocking.
Yeah.
And it really happened. I knew this was a memoir, so it's like, oh man.
Right.
But yeah, yeah, that's what you're describing. And you know what? My grandmother, it sounds like your mom had a lot of psychopathic tendencies because my grandmother had the same philosophy was if you do her in, she would do the most insane, hurtful stuff to get back to you and get even with you. And it didn't matter who you were. There was no person safe in her life.
No.
And I was her favorite granddaughter, favorite grandchild, and she had a favorite son. I tell you, she was mean to both of us too.
Right.
It wasn't like we got anything. We were saved from something. We weren't. But
Yeah.
so I know we're getting short on time, and I want to spend the last 10 plus minutes talking about how to begin to heal, because I think this is the pivotal part. We've already established that healing the cognitive dissonance can't be done by trying to prove the truth. You can't prove the truth that this is a good person or a bad person. Just the fact that you're having to do that already gave you the answer. Healthy relationships don't make you prove anything. You don't need to find the truth. The truth is what you're living in, and there's a confidence and a comfortableness in it. There's a lack of sanity in that. So if you're experiencing any of that kind of what's real, what's not real, already you've settled the question. It's a troubled relationship. It failed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I didn't know that. Is that new information? I mean, hearing me say that, I know you know it today, but did you know that?
No.
No,
not at all. Oh no. Honestly, that's like a concept I'm just starting to really accept this year.
Yeah.
Like
I still today have,
you know?
Yeah, I still have to say it to myself when I've been back online dating, and anybody who makes me feel a little confused, I say to myself, Carrie, the confusion is the sign this person's a problem.
Yes.
move on. You already have the answers. This is not a, maybe they wrote a bad profile, but the fact that they can't write a good profile for me is enough to throw it out. I don't want to have someone that creates confusion in me.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's the first thing. Oh, hi Debbie. I'm glad you stopped by. So yeah, that's the first piece, is to know that don't don't try to settle the confusion. The fact that you're feeling confused is the sign that you're in a troubled relationship. So let's talk about how you actually heal. Do you want me to go ahead and start? Do you want me to launch
Yeah, why
into
don't
this?
you like give me just a little bit of like a softball start, and then I'll
Sure.
medium it, and then you finish off with the grand slam.
Okay. It's tool building. You got to begin to tool build, and you have to build how you're going to calm your overly anxious self down. There you go. There's the lob.
All right. So, oh man.
But
And
you do
for
this all the time, Bri. You're great at calming yourself down.
Well, thank you. I try. Yeah, it is. It's a collection of tools and resources. And for me, it was a lot of exploration, because I think we get really stuck in, well, I need to do it this way. Everyone says I need to do it this way. And that actually was part of the healing, was figuring out what tools work for me, regardless of what works for someone else. So
Sure.
I learned grounding techniques, bilateral stimulation music. I have sense that I recognize as safety. I've created a safe environment in certain aspects of my home. So if I need to like separate, it's like immediate sense of safety for me. Just like I've found ways to like cope and process when I'm feeling dysregulated in a way I couldn't before. I didn't know how. My mom didn't teach me. No one taught me.
Right. Well, no one taught me either. So I didn't know either. So yes, exactly. It is all the things that we do to re-regulate an upset nervous system. So if you have looked, and people are like, what kind of resources, what kind of books? Well, I can point, the books you want to look at are books about how to handle anxiety. It would be the same dynamic. Is managing anxiety is what you would also do to manage cognitive dissonance, except the trigger is different. When we're anxious, we feel panicky, lightheaded, maybe we're feeling frightened of something. We usually have something we're aware of. This isn't going to feel the same. This is back to what's real. Is this a person, good person, bad person? Should I stay? Should I go? What's wrong with me? If you're having any of those types of questions, that's your trigger to, instead of trying to solve the question, there's no solution to the question. That's a trick question, by the way. The questions don't work.
Yeah.
The solution is to say, oh, I'm dysregulating. I'm becoming confused. And the way to reorient myself is I need to begin to ground myself, calm myself down, and use things that emotionally stabilize me. And it could be, there's two levels. There's the somatic things that we do, and you identified some of them, like you actually probably do grounding, like go barefoot.
Yes.
Go barefoot outdoors is very great.
I go barefoot in my carpet because I normally wear socks in my house. So that's actually grounding for me. It feels very real to me because I never wanted to, my OCD, I don't want to touch the ground.
Yeah, but there's also grounding things you can buy. There's a grounding sheets. There's grounding. What it does is, and I don't completely understand it, but it's kind of like electrically kind of orienting. I know, almost like woo, but there is, even if there's nothing real about it, because I'm such a scientist, so I always question that. Just the fact that your foot's touching the ground and feeling the grass or feeling the carpet or feeling whatever. It makes the body have to be mindful of yourself in space. Yes, and in touch with your senses. It gets you back in touch with your senses. So I think anything that orients us to sense experience, like you said, smells, is a really, really great idea. Another good one that's easy is to go wash your face. Yes. Now, I know for us that wear makeup, that's kind of like, oh, but that's why we also list baths. Again, it's not just because you pamper yourself with a bath bomb, but partly because it's a sensory experience.
Yes. I think that's not talked about enough. It's not like, we're not saying like go take a bath to relax per se, although that might be a part of it. Yeah. It's the sensory, like taking your attention to what you're experiencing physically, not just emotionally.
Yes. And I would add Epsom salts or salts, because what you want to do is you're thinking at an electrolyte level, and you're kind of creating sort of almost a womb-like experience.
Yes.
You have to really think about that.
They have some with lavender in it, and it's lovely.
That's really lovely too. So the first thing to do is to create a sensory experience that helps you orient yourself in your own body and get back in touch with yourself. And then the second thing is to do something that's kind of calming with the mind, that helps you to regulate the body and re-regulate the system. And then one of the things I love to do is diaphragmatic or deep breathing. And there's YouTube videos on how to do that, to re-regulate the body, re-regulate our system, move it out of the hyper aroused, frightened, bad feeling state, which is called the sympathetic, or that ties into the polyvagal nerve theory, that we've got our system is over aroused. It will help reset the system that's basically run autonomically or involuntarily, so it makes it really hard to reset, because I can't tell you, just reset that system or just change your heart rate. But you can change your breathing, and your breathing, like a domino, will begin to help change the rest of it. So that's another thing.
I found on YouTube some vagal nerve like yoga exercises to like help activate it or deactivate it.
Right. Yeah. So it's a parasympathetic, sympathetic system. So parasympathetic is when you're calm and it has a hormonal piece to it and a neurotransmitter piece to it. It all matches. And then the sympathetic is the response that you move into when you're into a fight or flight state. Someone said they just learned box breathing. That's fascinating. Have you heard of box breathing?
I've heard of it, and I've looked up once and I can't remember, but I do know there's it's like a certain amount of breaths, certain amount of breaths, certain amount of breaths, certain amount of breaths. And I think you like alternate between like slow and fast, I'm pretty sure. And like how many.
Oh, interesting. Thanks for saying that, Heavenly. I appreciate that. I'll check into that. I also have learned, I don't know if this is more of a meditation experiences, but a meditative breath prayer, where you actually do like a walk, like a labyrinth walk, and then you do certain kind of breathing to the walk. That's very, very calming. If you're doing a labyrinth walk, or the ability to find one in your area and to do that, that's another very helpful thing.
I do really well with like guided meditation, because like meditation, when they're like, oh, just empty your mind. I'm like, I'm not that kind of person. I need someone to tell me what not to think of. So so I do really well with like very much like I need the voice telling me what to focus on. And I actually find that's really helpful, because then I'm not focused on all the stuff that's actually activating me. It's making me focused in on what this person's telling me to focus on.
Yeah, I agree. That's really, really great. We have somebody in our Narc Avengers community who does have guided meditations, and that's Manjeet Bri. So if you're looking for some help, she actually has a website where you can download and purchase her guided meditations. Yeah, I think that's super helpful too. And anything else that you want to add? There's a lot we could unpack here, because there's a whole lot you can do. But I want to point to a few resources for us as we wrap up. Anything you want to add as a way to tie into that before we do that?
Two quick things. So what I tell my clients when they get on the roundabout of questions that you said, the questions that lead to no good answers, I tell them ask better questions. So the better question that I usually tell them is like, instead of making it about like, well, why do they do this? Why is this happening? All that stuff. I go, instead ask yourself, what do I need right now? What's something I can give myself in this moment? What kind of comfort am I looking for? And is there a way I can provide that to myself? Not making it someone else's responsibility like the abusers, but you. What can you do for you right now? So that's like one way that I try to challenge when I get stuck in the unhelpful question mode, change it to a question that is helpful.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, you and I didn't mention today, and we should, but is avoiding contact with the abusive people to the degree you can is very, very, very important. I know that it's not always as feasible as you wish that it was. That's probably why I know it's such common advice. I didn't want to give the common advice, but I didn't want to not say it, because it needs to be said that, of course, getting yourself out of the situation, getting your children out of the situation is the first best step. And then there's all these other things you can add to it. Well, interestingly enough, Sandra Brown said they're working on EMDR that does both positive EMDR and positive memories as well as negative memories. Because I want to add this piece, guys, because this is really, really important. Hear me on this. Cognitive dissonance isn't just activated by negative memories. It's also activated by positive memories, because it increases the confusion. When we think of a positive memory, we think, well, maybe they're better than we think. And we're also vulnerable to being hoovered. The problem is that they're still who they are. They're still
Yeah.
exploitive, manipulative, and probably very deceptive. So it doesn't matter that it's a positive memory. It wasn't probably a real memory, probably
Mhm.
was something they created as a falsehood or even a false like future faking, but it also leads you back to the confusion. So you need to break out of that, break out of the confusion. And so positive memories are a problem as much as the negative memories are a problem. So they're
Yes.
looking at a new form of EMDR that works on both. Now, if the
I was
research is still out, they're still working on it, but
right. I was gonna say I don't know if this helps or not, but if I'm thinking about my personal journey with combating the positive memories, I felt like for me radical acceptance of this person is an abuser, which means all of it was a manipulation, including the positive memories, which allowed me to see them through a new lens.
yeah.
At least on an intellectual level. I don't know if that helped with my cognitive dissonance or not, but for me, it did help. Cause like when people are like, oh, but we have such a good time together. I'm like, BS, it's all BS. I'm so sorry, but it's BS. Like I'm so quick
Yeah.
to like, nope, it's not a good time. It's
Yeah.
not, it's an illusion.
Yeah. What I say to myself is that was a lie and that person never existed and you need to grieve them. Let's do the
Yes.
grief work of wishing that it was better than it was. That wasn't real. I mean, I was thinking recently, he said that he was working on this special dance to show me that when we got married, that this as an explanation for all his time missing. Oh no.
Mm-hmm.
And I later confronted him. He admitted, no, he never worked on that. He just fed me that lie, and it was really never. And I actually believed and was waiting for it. Couldn't wait to see the dance. I didn't know it was all a lie. That was way too new to me at that moment to understand that.
Right.
So let me point us to some more direction because I know, like we said, we just barely scratched the surface.
Yeah.
You have resources. I have resources. Why don't you go with your resources first, and then I'll talk about mine.
Like resources in general.
Yeah, like how can like you work with this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So how can they find you?
Sure.
What do you offer to help them that they can find you offline and online?
Thank you. I'm like I need direction, so thank you.
I'm
So
marketing,
hi.
girlfriend, marketing.
Hi, I own a lot of books that are helpful. One of them is by Carrie McAvoy, PhD. Love you more. And I say this because community is a really big part, I believe, of healing. So just showing up here today is actually participating in community. But in order to work with me and some of the resources I have, I do have a resource page. It has all of my favorite podcasts, YouTubes, articles, and I'm always updating it. Maybe not too consistently, but I try as much as I can to get to it. I'm offering group coaching sessions for Boundaries for the Holidays the Sunday before Thanksgiving. We know how hard it is to do toxic family during this time. I do have an online course. This is what I would say is my baby. It's a rebuilding after abuse course. So all this stuff, like a lot of the stuff that Carrie and I talked about, it's the in-depth journey. I would consider it like a roadmap of all the tools and resources I found incredibly helpful to get me to this point in my healing journey. And that too, I also continue to update as my knowledge broadens. Because I'm still learning. We all are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, link in bio if you want a one-on-one.
Yeah, yeah. So
And
abuse is abuse. So if you want to find Brief, look for Abuse Different as YouTube. That's a little harder to find.
I did change it to abuse is abuse now. So
Oh,
that way it's all,
fantastic.
yeah.
Okay, okay. So you can find her across all of that. For myself, what I have to offer is if you want to break the cognitive dissonance, really resolve it, I have an online course as well as a workbook, a print and a digital version. You can find that in the link of my bio. It's both there. And I want to give you guys a tip. I obviously think the course is the best way to go because it includes video and it's a much slower experience. But if you can't afford it, please, the digital as well as the print version work as well. So they can stand alone because I know not everybody has the money. The best experience obviously would be the whole package, but you can do either or. Yes, abuse is on Instagram. Put an underscore between in the spaces. Abuse underscore is underscore abuse. That's how you find
Yeah, I
Bri.
think on Instagram it's actually an underscore abuse underscore is
Okay.
underscore abuse.
Yeah. But if you put in Bri and put abuse.
Someone had it. Rude.
Yeah, I know. I know. The only thing that I started, and I know this may be new to you, Bri, is that Trey De La Torre and myself, and he's called I Was Like Yo Trey, and I have now launched group coaching specifically with tool building for rumination and obsessive thinking and cognitive dissonance. So
Which
that
is
is
perfect.
a 6-week course. It just started, group 1 started and has been so popular. We're going to go ahead and kick off group 2 in right after the holidays. So January 7th, we'll kick off group 2, and there's 15 spots, and we'll have signups available. So please watch my link for that. And it is, we work with you in a small group setting on Zoom, helping you build. It's a very, very tool-based, very education-based tool building experience. So if this is what you're struggling with, then this is a great fit. And then, of course, you can find me on all platforms, Carrie McAvoy, PhD. This was wonderful. I knew this would be fantastic. So, someone said we should do a podcast together. I'm going to be adding interviews to my podcast. Awesome. So, yes, I want to have you on as soon as I start that up. So I will do that. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. I usually go online twice a week. This week is a weird week because I'm going to be in Toronto for the back half of it. I wish you'd be there. I'm going to miss you. But so I will be leaving tomorrow and being with 6 or 5 other creators from Narc Avengers, Lee Hammock, Lisa Sunny, KP Stratman, Jules with his Hearts with Jules, as well as Roller Coaster of Love. We will be together doing a big kind of event in downtown Toronto. There's still room left. If anyone wants to meet us at the reception, please be sure to do that. And I will definitely have people are saying, please have Bri on again. We definitely will. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank
you guys. That means so much.
Yeah. So thank you so much for both of you, everybody being here on Instagram. Now, I always repost these in their entirety over on YouTube. This will go live on Thursday on YouTube. So if you missed part of this today, or you know someone you think will really benefit from watching this, you can see this in its whole from start to finish. And we kind of unpack cognitive dissonance as a whole from start to finish. And it will be on Thursday at youtube.com, Carrie McAvoy, PhD. All right. Thank you so much, Bri. You have a great rest of the day.
You too.
Right. Yep. Bye-bye.
Right. Bye.